Legacy of Joseph Stalin is etched in a shade of red so deep it stains the 20th century forever. To some, he was the vozhd, the supreme leader who dragged a backward agrarian society into the atomic age and broke the back of the Nazi war machine. To others, he was a tyrant whose paranoia transformed an entire nation into a prison built on fear, silence, and death. Even today, decades after his death, the name of Joseph Stalin still divides historians, politicians, and ordinary people. Some remember victory. Others remember terror. So how bad was Stalin, actually? To answer that question, we have to begin long before the Soviet Union became a superpower. Before he became Stalin, he was Joseph Bessarionis Yughashvili, born in 1878 in the small town of Gori, Georgia, then part of the Russian Empire. His childhood was not simply poor, it was brutal. His father was a violent alcoholic shoemaker who regularly beat him and his mother. Disease scarred his face with permanent smallpox marks, and a carriage accident damaged his left arm for life. Stalin was not born with privilege, wealth, or power. He was born with resentment. As a child, he was intelligent and disciplined enough to earn a scholarship to an Orthodox seminary. But instead of becoming a priest, he became obsessed with revolutionary politics. He secretly read the banned writings of Karl Marx and revolutionary pamphlets that criticized the Russian Empire. The young Stalin didn't dream of reforming society. He wanted to destroy the old order entirely. By his early 20s, he had entered the dangerous underground world of revolutionary activism. He organized strikes, spread propaganda, and participated in criminal operations to fund the Bolshevik movement. One of the most famous incidents was a bank robbery in Tiflis in 1907 that reportedly killed dozens of people. For years, Stalin lived in hiding, constantly arrested, exiled, and sent to Siberia by the Tsarist government. During these harsh years of survival and isolation, he adopted the name Stalin, meaning man of steel. It was a name that would eventually terrify millions. When the Russian Revolution erupted in 1917, Stalin was not the face of the movement. The stars of the revolution were figures like Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky, men known for their speeches, intellect, and charisma. Stalin appeared ordinary, quiet, almost forgettable. One political rival even dismissed him as a gray blur. But Stalin understood something the others underestimated. Real power does not live in speeches. It lives in systems. After the Bolsheviks seized control and established the Soviet Union, Stalin became General Secretary of the Communist Party. At the time, the position seemed administrative and unimportant. But Stalin transformed it into the center of political control. He quietly appointed loyal officials across the country, factory managers and military officers, local party leaders, and bureaucrats. Every promotion created another person indebted to him. He built power patiently, like a spider constructing a web. When Lenin died in 1924, a bitter struggle for control began. Trotsky believed in spreading communist revolution worldwide. Stalin argued for socialism in one country, focusing on strengthening the Soviet Union first. Through manipulation, alliances, betrayals, and political calculation, Stalin slowly eliminated every rival around him. Trotsky was eventually exiled from the Soviet Union and later assassinated in Mexico by a Soviet agent. By the late 1920s, Stalin stood alone as the undisputed ruler of the Soviet Union. And once he gained power, he had no intention of sharing it. Stalin looked at the Soviet Union and saw a nation dangerously behind the industrial powers of Europe. Factories were limited. Infrastructure was weak. The military was outdated. He believed that if the Soviet Union did not modernize rapidly, it would eventually be destroyed. So he launched the first five-year plan. This was not just an economic program. It was a revolution imposed by force. Stalin ordered rapid industrialization across the country. Massive factories, steel plants, dams, railways, and industrial cities emerged almost overnight. Millions of workers were mobilized to transform the Soviet economy. But this transformation came at a horrifying human cost. To feed growing industrial cities and finance machinery imports, Stalin forced peasants into collective farms controlled by the state. Wealthier peasants, labeled kulaks, were declared enemies of the people. Many were executed, others were deported to labor camps, entire villages were destroyed. The result was catastrophe. In Ukraine, a devastating famine known as the Holodomor killed millions of people between 1932 and 1933. Families starved to death while grain continued to be exported abroad. Historians still debate whether the famine was deliberate genocide or the result of ruthless economic policies. But there is little debate about the suffering. At the same time, Stalin's paranoia grew stronger. By the mid-1930s, he no longer trusted even the Communist Party itself. This led to one of the darkest chapters in Soviet history, the Great Purge. The Soviet secret police, known as the NKVD, arrested military officers, government officials, intellectuals, artists, scientists, and ordinary civilians. People disappeared overnight. Confessions were extracted through torture. Show trials turned former revolutionaries into public traitors before they were executed. The Gulag prison system expanded across Siberia and the Arctic. Millions were imprisoned in brutal labor camps where prisoners mined gold, cut timber, and built canals under deadly conditions. Fear became the foundation of Soviet life. Children were taught to report suspicious behavior. Neighbors feared neighbors. Even loyal supporters of Stalin understood that no one was truly safe. Yet despite the terror, Stalin also transformed the Soviet Union into an industrial giant. By the late 1930s, the USSR had become one of the world's fastest-growing industrial powers. Factories produced tanks, aircraft, steel, and weapons on a massive scale. To supporters, Stalin had accomplished in a decade what had taken Western countries generations. To critics, he had built progress on mountains of corpses. Then came the greatest crisis of all. In August 1939, Stalin shocked the world by signing a non-aggression pact with Adolf Hitler. The agreement, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, allowed Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union to divide Eastern Europe between them. For a brief moment, two of history's most brutal regimes cooperated. But Stalin underestimated Hitler. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. Millions of German soldiers stormed into Soviet territory. The Soviet military was unprepared, weakened by Stalin's own purges of experienced officers. Entire armies collapsed. Cities fell rapidly. For days, Stalin reportedly withdrew in shock, refusing to believe Hitler had betrayed him. But eventually, the man of steel recovered. And in that moment of catastrophe, Stalin became the wartime leader. History would never forget. He refused to flee Moscow. He addressed the Soviet people directly. Instead of speaking only about communism, he spoke about survival, sacrifice, and the defense of Mother Russia. Factories were dismantled and moved eastward beyond German reach. Entire populations mobilized for war. Soviet soldiers fought with extraordinary resilience under unimaginable conditions. Then came the Battle of Stalingrad, one of the deadliest battles ever fought. For months, Soviet and German soldiers fought street by street, building by building, often hand to hand. The city became hell. But in 1943, the Red Army achieved a decisive victory. The defeat shattered Nazi momentum and changed the course of World War II. From that point forward, Germany was pushed steadily backward. By May 1945, Soviet troops captured Berlin, and the Soviet flag flew above the Reichstag. The war had cost the Soviet Union nearly 27 million lives. But Hitler had been defeated, and Stalin emerged from the conflict as one of the most powerful men on earth. At conferences in Yalta and Potsdam, Stalin sat beside Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt as they reshaped the post-war world. Eastern Europe soon fell under Soviet influence. Communist governments loyal to Moscow spread across the region. The Iron Curtain descended, and the Cold War began. To millions across the Soviet Union, Stalin was now more than a leader. He was a symbol of victory. Portraits of him filled schools, factories, and homes. Propaganda portrayed him almost like a god. This became known as the cult of personality. But behind the image of strength remained a system built on fear. Stalin's rule had industrialized a continent and defeated Nazi Germany. Yet it had also destroyed millions of lives. On March 5th, 1953, Stalin died after suffering a stroke. According to several accounts, his guards delayed helping him because they were too afraid to enter his room without permission. Even in death, fear surrounded him. After Stalin's death, his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, publicly condemned many of his crimes in a speech that shocked the Soviet world. Statues were removed, cities renamed. The process of de-Stalinization began. But Stalin's shadow never disappeared. Even today, debates over his legacy remain deeply divided. Supporters argue that Stalin transformed a weak agricultural empire into a superpower capable of competing with the West. They point out that the Soviet Union defeated Nazi Germany largely through the industrial and military strength developed under his leadership. Some Russians still view him as a symbol of order, discipline, and national strength. Critics argue that no amount of industrial progress can justify the millions who died through famine, executions, forced labor, and political terror. They argue that Stalin built a system where human life became expendable in service of the state. And perhaps that is what makes Joseph Stalin such a disturbing figure in history. He cannot be explained simply as a hero or villain. He was both the architect of Soviet power and the creator of immense human suffering. He saved Europe from Nazi domination while imprisoning his own people in fear. He modernized the nation while destroying countless lives in the process. So how bad was Stalin actually? Maybe the answer cannot be measured only in statistics or body counts. Maybe the answer exists somewhere between the pride of those who remember the Soviet victory in 1945 and the silence of the frozen mass graves scattered across Siberia. Perhaps the most terrifying thing about Stalin is not that he was a monster, it is that he was human. A man who believed that history justified any sacrifice, a leader who saw individuals as expendable pieces in the construction of a superpower, and that is why his legacy still matters. Because Stalin forces us to confront one of history's darkest questions. Can greatness excuse cruelty? Or does the cost eventually erase the achievement? History has given us the facts. The judgment, however, belongs to you.